Subscribe to Echo Tales for deeply emotional, romantic, and mature stories that echo through your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support meaningful storytelling. Ethan never imagined his life would feel so heavy with silence. It wasn't the kind of quiet that brings peace or comfort. It was the kind that settles like a thick fog between two people who once promised to share everything. For months now, he and Claire had been living side by side, but it was as if an invisible wall had slowly risen between them. Their home, once filled with laughter and warmth, now echoed with the absence of conversation and the weight of unspoken words. Every evening, they sat at the same dinner table, ate the same meals, and went to bed in the same room, but the warmth that had once bound them together was gone. Ethan often caught himself reaching for Claire's hand, only to find hers cold and withdrawn. The smiles that used to come easily between them now felt forced, and he couldn't remember the last time they had truly looked at each other as more than just two people sharing a routine. He loved her, he was sure of that. But love sometimes feels like a fading photograph, where the edges blur and the colors lose their shine. He wondered, silently and desperately, if Claire felt it too, or if she had already given up, quietly surrendering to a distance he didn't know how to bridge. It was during this fragile gray period in their marriage that Lily, Claire's younger sister, arrived unexpectedly. The invitation had been casual. Lily needed a place to stay for a few weeks after losing her job. Ethan remembered Lily from years ago, a spirited girl with a wild laugh and a fearless energy that sometimes embarrassed Claire. But now, standing in their doorway, Lily was different. She had grown into a woman shaped by her own struggles. Her eyes held a quiet sadness that made her seem both distant and achingly close. Ethan felt a strange pull the moment she stepped into the house. There was something in the way she moved, careful yet unguarded, that made him notice parts of himself he hadn't seen in a long time. That first evening, as the three of them sat awkwardly in the living room, Lily's laughter rang out, brighter and louder than the silence he was used to. Ethan found himself drawn to her light, even though a part of him felt guilty for it. Later that night, Ethan and Lily found themselves alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft tapping of rain against the window. They sipped cold tea, a fragile piece hanging between them. Lily looked at Ethan with an honesty that startled him. "You don't smile much anymore," she said softly, almost like she was stating a fact she'd been watching for a while. Ethan looked down, ashamed. "I guess I forgot how." The words felt heavy and true. It was the first time anyone had said out loud what he had been feeling inside. For a moment, the distance between them seemed to shrink, and he caught a glimpse of something tender in Lily's eyes, a gentle understanding that didn't judge or demand. But Ethan pushed the thought away quickly. He was Claire's husband, after all, and Lily was her sister. Still, that night lingered in his mind longer than he expected. It wasn't a betrayal or a temptation, at least not yet. It was something softer, quieter. A small crack in the armor he'd built around his heart, a flicker of warmth in a room that had grown cold. He told himself it was nothing more than loneliness, that the love he and Claire shared was just tired, waiting to be rekindled. But deep down, Ethan knew that something had changed. And sometimes, change begins in the quietest moments, between the lines, in the spaces where we least expect it. When Lily moved in, the house seemed to breathe differently, almost like it had found a small, flickering spark amid the dull routine Ethan and Claire had been stuck in for months. She didn't just bring her suitcase and clothes. She carried an energy that was raw and real, the kind that doesn't ask permission to fill a room. Ethan noticed how Claire's eyes would occasionally brighten when Lily laughed, as if her sister's presence was a gentle reminder of happier times, even if that light sometimes quickly faded. Lily wasn't here to fix anything. She never pretended. She had the answers. She simply shared space, moving through the house with quiet purpose, cooking meals with clumsy grace and talking to Ethan about things they hadn't spoken of before. Books they loved, music that made them feel alive, childhood, fears that never quite left. Those conversations became unexpected moments of relief for Ethan, little islands where the weight on his chest felt lighter. Claire was different now, distant and distracted. She often seemed tired, as if carrying invisible burdens no one else could see. Ethan tried to reach out, to hold her hand or share a word, but Claire had begun retreating into herself, her smile slipping further out of reach. It wasn't just fatigue. It was something deeper, a sadness that seemed to settle in the spaces between them, like the shadow of a love that was losing its way. One evening, Ethan and Lily sat together in the living room. The world outside was quiet, the soft glow of streetlights casting gentle shadows on the walls. Lily's eyes were full of something unspoken, a vulnerability that touched Ethan in ways he wasn't prepared for. "I used to think love was supposed to be fireworks," Lily said softly, her voice breaking the silence like a whispered confession. "Bright, explosive, all-consuming. But now, I think love is about being seen." Ethan looked at her, feeling the truth of those words settle inside him like a small, fragile hope. Being seen. Not just looking, but truly being seen. Understood. Accepted. Even in the broken parts. That's what he longed for with Claire, but hadn't found in a long time. Lily didn't push him to explain himself or try to fix his broken heart. She just listened, and that was something Ethan hadn't realized he needed so badly. There was a kindness in her presence that felt like a balm on old wounds. Yet beneath their growing closeness, Ethan was haunted by guilt. Claire was his wife, his partner, the one he had promised to stand by through everything. And while he felt drawn to Lily's warmth, he knew that this quiet connection was a dangerous place to linger. He tried to remind himself that this was just a moment, a fleeting comfort in a time of loneliness. But feelings don't always listen to reason. They creep in quietly, settling deep inside, changing the way we see everything. Claire's silence became louder with each passing day. One afternoon, Ethan found her sitting alone in the garden, staring at a spot on the ground, as if searching for answers in the dirt. When he sat beside her, she didn't move or speak. The distance between them felt like a vast ocean. And for the first time, Ethan felt utterly helpless. Lily was like a light shining just beyond that ocean, warm and inviting. But crossing the water meant confronting storms neither of them were ready to face. One night, after Claire had gone to bed early, Ethan found himself in the kitchen again, this time with Lily. The house was still, but between them, a quiet tension hummed in the air, something fragile and charged. They shared stories and silences, glances and breaths that lingered a little too long. Neither of them spoke the truth growing in their hearts. Neither dared to name the longing that filled the space between them. They only knew, deep down, that things were changing. The thing about silence is that it can be both a refuge and a trap. For Ethan, Lily was becoming the person who saw the cracks in his life. The cracks Claire no longer seemed to notice. And though it scared him, he couldn't turn away. Because sometimes, the things we don't say the most. It was a rainy afternoon when everything felt like it was about to change. But nothing quite did. Ethan had come home earlier than usual, hoping to find a moment of calm in the chaos of his thoughts. Claire was out with friends, giving the house an unusual stillness that both comforted and unsettled him. In the garden, Lily stood barefoot on the wet grass, letting the cold drops soak her hair and clothes without a care. The rain fell softly around her, but the way she stood there made it feel like she was trying to wash something away. A sadness, a memory, or maybe just the weight of the world. Ethan watched her from the porch, heart pounding in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. There was a kind of fragile beauty in her quiet defiance, in the way she welcomed the rain as if it could cleanse more than just the outside. For a moment, he almost didn't want to break the spell. But then he stepped out, his voice steady but soft. "You're going to catch a cold." Lily turned to face him, her eyes glistening, not just from the rain, but from something deeper. "Maybe I need to feel something," she said with a sad smile, "the kind that touches your heart, because it's filled with quiet pain and longing." He moved closer, the distance between them shrinking in the gentle rain. They stood so near that Ethan could see the way her breath came in little clouds, the trembling in her hands. There was an unspoken question hanging in the air, thick and heavy, begging for an answer neither was sure they wanted to give. "I don't want to hurt her," Ethan whispered, the truth spilling out before he could stop it. Lily's gaze didn't waver. "Then don't," she said quietly. "But don't pretend you're not hurting too." Their hands brushed, just a simple touch, electric and tender. It wasn't a kiss, nor was it a promise. It was a moment suspended in time, fragile and full of meaning, a touch that said everything and nothing at once. Ethan felt a rush of emotion swirling inside him, guilt, desire, confusion, and something that felt like hope. But just as quickly as it had started, the moment passed. Neither moved closer. Neither spoke more. The rain kept falling, washing over them like a quiet witness to a secret almost told. That night, Ethan lay awake thinking about the garden, about Lily's eyes, about the touch that lingered on his skin. He knew the line they had, almost crossed, was dangerous. It was a threshold that could change everything: his marriage, his life, the fragile peace they all clung to. But he also knew that something in him had already shifted. Lily wasn't just a guest anymore. She was a mirror, reflecting parts of himself he'd buried deep. The parts that longed to be seen, to be understood, to be loved without condition. Meanwhile, Claire remained a ghost in the house. Her presence was still there, but it felt distant, like a faded memory of warmth he once cherished. She didn't ask questions, didn't challenge him, but Ethan could see the pain in her eyes whenever their gazes met. He wondered if she knew, if she felt the shift in the air between him and her sister. He wasn't sure how much longer they could all pretend everything was normal. That night in the rain was a turning point, not because anything was said or done, but because it revealed a truth that had been growing quietly in their hearts. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the silent moments, the almost touches, the things left unsaid that leave the deepest marks. Ethan understood then that he was caught between two worlds, the one he had built with Claire, and the one opening slowly with Lily. Both filled with longing and heartbreak, both impossible to ignore. And in that quiet, rain-soaked garden, Ethan realized something he never expected. Sometimes the most powerful connections are the ones we almost let happen. Claire never had to hear it from anyone else. She knew. Not in words, but in the way Ethan's eyes sometimes betrayed him, lingering a little too long on Lily, in the quiet moments when he thought she wasn't watching. The truth settled between them like a fragile, unspoken secret that grew heavier with every passing day. One morning, Claire finally found the courage to break the silence. They sat across from each other at the breakfast table, the sunlight filtering through the kitchen window, but somehow failing to warm the chill in the air. Ethan could see the pain in her eyes, the heartbreak masked behind a calm, steady voice. "Do you love her?" Claire asked, her voice steady but vulnerable. Ethan swallowed, hard. It was the question he had avoided, feared, and yet somehow expected. He wanted to lie, to protect her and the life they had shared. But he knew the truth would free them both. No, he said quietly. But part of me needed her. Claire nodded slowly, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes but refusing to fall. That's the part I should have seen, she whispered. It wasn't anger, not really. It was sadness, a deep, aching kind that comes when you realize you've lost something precious, maybe forever. There was no shouting, no blame. Just a quiet understanding that sometimes love changes or fades or breaks in ways neither of them wanted. And sometimes the hardest thing is to let go. Ethan looked at Claire, remembering the years of laughter, shared dreams, and promises whispered in the dark. They hadn't failed completely. They had simply grown apart, caught in the painful gap between who they were and who they had become. Lily left a week later, quietly packing her bags with the same gentle grace she had brought into their lives. She didn't say goodbye to Ethan, only left a note on the kitchen table, a message folded with care and honesty. Sometimes we meet someone who reminds us of who we could have been, but that doesn't mean we're meant to become them. Take care of your heart. L. Those words stayed with Ethan long after the door closed behind her. They were a reminder that some connections aren't meant to last forever, but they still leave their mark, soft, lasting, and impossible to forget. In the months that followed, Ethan and Claire took different paths. They separated gently, with respect and shared memories, rather than anger or bitterness. Their love story hadn't ended with fireworks or heartbreak. It had ended with quiet honesty, a bittersweet farewell to what once was. Sometimes, late at night, Ethan would think of Lily, not with regret, not with longing, but with a tender ache, a soft echo of a time when his heart was touched in ways he never expected. He knew now that not every love story is about forever. Some are about remembering, about learning who we are when someone finally sees us, not perfectly, but truly. And in that remembering there is a kind of healing, a kind of peace, because the heart doesn't always end up where we think it will. Sometimes it ends up exactly where it needs to be,